Hello and welcome to my week 4 discussion board post. I decided to do my discussion on Mercy Otis Warren. She is considered and was and is a glowing example of achievement and impact in the American Revolution, especially as a woman in that time. There's actually a statue of her that was erected in Barnstable, Massachusetts. It really shows her vigor and her passion. I have a picture of it linked down below if you haven't seen it before. She is holding a book, pen in hand. Her sleeves are flaring, so it kind of depicts some motion, and I think that's a good way to think of her after doing some studying. She was the daughter of James and Mary Eileen Otis, and she was born in September of 1728. So her father, James, was an attorney who was elected to the Massachusetts legislature in 1745. So something really interesting about her is her formal education was actually non-existent. It wasn't really tailored towards her at all. She sat in on her husband's, her brother's, not her husband's. She sat in growing up on her brother's lessons and then the reverend who taught them was Reverend Jonathan Russell. Her brothers actually had a lot to do with her display of intelligence as well. Her older brother was injured in a bar brawl when she was older, and this is according to legend. I was able to find a couple of sources with this, but the main one talked about it in the Smithsonian Magazine article. So it kind of goes back to the historical flair that we like to add on, just like that Betsy Ross article that we had read earlier in the week as well, about maybe not embellishment, but certainly adding to the grandeur of a story. But the story goes that her brother was injured in a brawl, and because of that, he went mad because of his brain injury, which is really sad. But she started responding to his correspondence. So she would respond in kind to letters and that, and her husband encouraged her because he said that she was brilliant, and that she had such an imagination, and she did. She wrote plays. She was the third woman in the States to be published with a book of poetry, and she was one of the first women in America, if not the first, to publish a nonfiction book that she was writing with politics. She was a staunch Jeffersonian Republican, so that put her at odds with John Adams. She was not about ratifying the Constitution. So she became such a glowing figure of what success and achievement looked like, especially as a woman in that time, like I had mentioned. I think it's interesting too, in contrast, she's different in some ways because in contrast to a lot of famous figures who maybe don't achieve fame or aren't viewed in a favorable light when they're alive, but after they pass years later, then they're recognized. She was recognized in her time as someone of importance, of what she had to say mattered, that she was a strong voice in the revolution. A couple of other ways that I thought she stood out, a lot of women married and were widowed and remarried because that was the time and men were fighting and people died, and that was what happened. But she and her husband both lived very full, long lives together. Her husband died, James Warren died when he was 80, and she died when she was 86. So or 80, yes, 86 years old. So her husband died just 6 years before her. So she was with James Warren her whole life, which is such a blessing to think about. It's so wonderful, and it was very different than the time. She remained vital and active, writing letters, political letters, all the way through her life up until her death, into her twilight years. So if you have a chance to look through the materials, I do have linked below. I've got a couple of scholarly articles that are very interesting. One by a Patricia Tarantello, I believe. And then another one by Eileen Hunt. That one's a very good one as well. Women Writing War. So if you have some time, definitely go through those links and check out that statue of her as well. She's an inspiring female figure in the Revolutionary War, and I really, really enjoyed learning about her this week. Have a good one.